Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. And a special thank you to the Counselors Committee for organizing this event today.
Thank you, Anna. Welcome, everyone. First of all, I want to start off by thanking Wendy, our president, for being here and supporting everything that we do as a committee. We are the Counselor Committee. I'm the chair of the Counselor Committee for FACCC. Secondly, I want to thank Lydia because Lydia really moved heaven and earth to put this together for us sort of at the last minute. So Lydia, thank you for connecting us to Anna and setting all of this up for us. I really, really appreciate it. We really appreciate it as a committee. And then, of course, I want to thank my fellow committee members who are a few of them are present here. Steve Bautista, Sara Nieves Lucas, Michelle Hiddleman, I believe is also in the room. We wanted to let you know that we invited Anna Mathews to conduct this for us because we have been working on looking at the practices that our colleges have in place regarding grade alleviation. So hopefully some of you attended our A&P session or the session that we did with the Chancellor's Office Counselors Conference, where we discussed a lot of those policies and how we are examining Title V to see what the language has to say about them. And also the fact that we are encouraging people to look at their own policies as an equity issue and advocate respectively at their home campuses via the proper channels, whether that's academic senate, policy committees, things of that nature. But what we wanted to do is take it a step further because we are FACCC after all. And we wanted to invite Anna Mathews, who I believe her title is Advocacy Manager, if I'm saying that correctly, to kind of teach you now and teach ourselves as well. How do we then move it forward, right? How do we create a legislative solution to what we as practitioners see as a problem on our respective campuses? And how do we make it system-wide? Because as a committee of counselors, we believe that it shouldn't just be one particular campus or district that benefits from a revamping of these policies to make them more student-friendly, but that it should be statewide because all of our students in our 115 community colleges deserve to have the same student-friendly policies as it relates to graduation, retention, and of course, transfer rates. So we just wanted to give you that background and thank these folks because without them, we wouldn't be here today. And a special thank you to all of you that took the time to come and learn about how to be a factivist and a transfer and a factivist and an advocate at the state level. So without further ado, Anna Mathews, take it away. Thank you so much for presenting today.
Of course, thank you for having me. I'm Anna Mathews, like Renee said, Advocacy Manager of the Faculty Association of California Community Colleges. Happy to be here today. And I know that the legislative process and advocacy in general can seem really daunting to step your foot into that world. So I wanted to sort of show you guys the lay of the land and demystify sort of how this process works and how you can engage with it. So the advocacy process, I've broken it down into three separate pots, if you will. There's local district level advocacy. There is advocacy within our statewide system of the California community colleges, and there's advocacy with the state legislature. And I know often we think the only advocacy that matters is what happens with the state legislature as it pertains to our CCC system. But the reality is that, when we have such a large system with 73 different districts, 116 different colleges, tons of faculty, administrators, students, we need to be having these conversations on multiple different levels. So to Renee's point, we can have some sort of equity and conversations about best practices, things of that sort, and move things forward for not just one group of people, but as many as we can get on board with some of these great policies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the local district level. So these are some groups of people who I would advise meeting with to start talking about, as Renee mentioned, lots of these local issues, local policies, things that are working, things that are not working, and things that you'd like to see changed, and really have those conversations on a smaller level to see what your district needs, what your particular group of students need, and to determine, is this a solution that would be better working on our district level to meet the specific needs of this group of students who we are supporting, or working through the various different levels from there. Conversations with lots of your administrators, college president, board of trustees, student trustee especially, engaging with students, the student government of your institution, student clubs, department leaders, and of course our wonderful faculty, classified staff, union leaders, academic senate, general staff, as well as board of supervisors and other local representatives who engage with your process. So those are some good conversations to start with as we move forward into this advocacy process. And I think it feels a little bit more low stakes, if you will, a little bit more inviting to start having those conversations on local levels first. So as far as the system-wide approach goes, I just wanted to illuminate sort of how Title V, which Renee also mentioned, which is the California Code of Regulations, is produced. So Title V and law are not the same. So law or education code is what is produced through the legislature, right? When we go through the bill legislative cycle, which I will cover in a little bit, the laws that are produced from that go into our ed code, and then Title V is the body of regulations that our community college board of governors produces, but they don't produce it on their own. So there are many system practitioners, as I will show you in a second, and they have representation on what we call consultation council, and they consult with the chancellor's office, provide feedback on these policies, and see if they can help provide the best regulations possible on implementing what's in ed code. Goes to the chancellor's office, and then it goes to the board of governors. And it's a very public process that is also important to engage with. We can give public comments at the board of governors meetings. The agendas are posted, and that's another important sort of forum for us as community college faculty, students, and advocates to engage with when we're talking about impacting and influencing community college policy as advocates. So that is the process that leads to the development of Title V regulations that determine sort of the implementation of how policies are going to go. So this is the breakdown of who is on the consultation council. I know this is overwhelming. There's a lot of acronyms going on here, but just to show that this is sort of the layout of who our system practitioners are, our system partners, the different organizations that we work with. FACCC is on this list, SSCCC is on this list, who the league is on this list, who sort of represent these various bodies of stakeholders within the California community college system, right? So when we're working on a system-wide level, we're engaging with these different partners over these different issues. Of course, everyone is representing different groups of people, have different perspectives. So that is also important dialogue to have when we're talking about policy, because every policy will impact these various groups differently, right? So it's important to really have these conversations and discussions as we move forward with policy. So conversations that we have on the local level, system-wide level, and the legislative level are important. So we're going to get into some of the state legislative stuff. This is the life cycle of a bill. So bills that there's a house of origin, either the assembly or the senate. So that's sort of where bills start. That's where they get their names and things like that. But the process really starts in January, and that is when organizations, system partners, like the list that I showed on the previous slide, come with their ideas that they've gotten from the groups of people who they represent. So FACCC particularly, we get all of our ideas for legislation from our faculty, right? We do town halls, we do surveys to see what issues that our faculty are facing. We do that in the fall to gear up for January, and then we have a fully fleshed out bill idea. We sort of take it to the legislature, and we are the sponsors of that bill. So various different organizations will sponsor pieces of legislation and sort of shepherd them through the legislative process. So sponsors need to have an author to carry their bill. So an author is a member of the legislature, that can be an assembly member or a senator, who will take up your bill, and once your bill is introduced formally, it will have a bill number and an AB or an SB attached to it. If an assembly member authored the bill, it'll be titled AB, then the number. If a senator authors it, it'll be SB, then the number. And whichever house the author is in, the assembly or senate, is called the house of origin, and that is the house it'll start going through the process in. So an example is one of our FACCC sponsored bills this year is a student housing study bill. It's called AB 2707. So it's authored by an assembly member, Assemblywoman Reyes. and it's going through the assembly first. After a bill has an author and has been formally introduced in March, it starts going through policy committees. So there are many different policy committees. The ones that are most relevant to us are Assembly Higher Education Committee and the Senate Education Committee. So almost all of the bills that have to do with education or community colleges particularly will end up going through these two committees. So throughout March and early April, there are committee hearings for these committees that lots of our bills will go through. So that's another place where we can engage with the process and have dialogue with the legislature, particular members on those committees, which I will get to in a second, regarding these bills. And this is kind of where the sausage gets made, I like to say. So then in late April, things start headed to Appropriations Committee. This is like the fiscal committee. So any bill that has a certain amount of money attached to it or a request for funding from the government needs to go to an Appropriations Committee. This is where we are right now. In a few weeks, it will be decided whether most of the bills will either die because they're too expensive during this budget deficit, unfortunately, or continue moving forward. So after this goes to Appropriations Committee, around June, we'll go to the second house for the bills that have moved forward. So if a bill started in the Assembly, then it will go to the Senate. Or if it started in the Senate, if it's past appropriations, then it'll flip back over to the Assembly. So everybody gets to sort of participate in this. All right, I'm going to answer a question from the chat really quickly. Steve Bautista says, I'm following a bill that is placed in suspense. What does that mean? So basically within appropriations, bills will be heard and lots of them, which are expensive and deliberations need to be had about whether or not it's fiscally feasible for the government to go through with these bills, will be placed on suspense. And that means conversations are being had and there will be a date where the suspense file, as it's called, is released and we find out whether these bills pass or unfortunately die in committee. Lots of bills that are on suspense unfortunately die. It can be a mass grave situation, unfortunately, but that is a part of the process, right? In order to make sure that we're balancing our budget as a state and make sure that we have cost-effective measures that are being put into place, particularly in budget deficits like we are in right now. So we're going to keep moving forward. So the political makeup of the legislature. I know that we talk a lot about the state of California being a supermajority. So there are 32 Democrats in the Senate and 8 Republicans. And a supermajority is 27 of those. And in the Assembly, there are 80 members, 62 of which are Democrats, 18 of which are Republicans. A supermajority is 53 members. And I know that, there's a lot of blue on that chart, right? But parties are not a monolith. There are different types of Democrats and they vote in different ways. There are progressive Democrats, there are labor Democrats, and there are corporate Democrats, right? And all of them will sort of vote in different ways. So it's important to, when you're voting, when you're looking at policies, things like that, certainly to look at the policies that particular members of the legislature are voting on. What are their priorities? Things like that. Just looking at a D or an R next to someone's name isn't unfortunately going to tell you that much, right? So there are Democrats that vote very consistently along with the Republicans, right? So that looks different than a progressive Democrat's votes. So I just wanted to sort of break that down. And there's a very wide variety of opinions and things of that sort within the California state legislature, despite us being a state with a Democratic supermajority. So that's certainly something to keep on your radar. So just look up CA Leg Info, and that has all of the information on bills, where they are in the process. You can see vote counts, the status of the bills. You can read the analysis. You can read the bill text. So that is the best way, I think, based on particular bills to see. And I believe you can also break down things by
also, many of our union partners and other organizations will produce scorecards on legislators and how they vote on bills sort of collectively. So that's another thing you can look into if you're not concerned about a specific bill, if you're looking at like a history of how a member votes in general. Those are also another source for you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so this is a page of links. I know someone had asked if we are going to share this presentation. Yes, we will. But these are links that you can access later just to the Assembly and Senate homepages, the roster of the members, And you can watch all of these committee hearings, right, as they're happening. You can check the agendas in advance to see if there are any bills of interest to you. And that is another way that you can sort of participate in this process and be an informed advocate. Okay, so can you put your hand up on Zoom if you know who your state senator and assembly member are? All right, we have 8. Okay, that is not that many, right? But that's why we're here. This is an advocacy training. So if your hand was not raised, I would like you to scan the QR code that I have on the screen, and that'll show you who your representatives are. If you live in a different area than your college will also have its own representative. So I would like some of you guys to go ahead, click on that link, find out who your representatives are, and drop the names of your state senator and assembly member in the chat. I see, Violetta, you wrote that your representatives are Robert Rivas and Ana Caballero. Ana Caballero, senator, is the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, so she has a lot of power. So that is a good district for you to be a good advocate for the community colleges in. And Robert Rivas is the speaker of our state assembly. There we go. And if you go to your members' website, you can find out what committees they serve on, things like that, the issue areas that are important to them. And John Fox, I know you wrote that John Laird is your senator. He is on the Senate. He's the chair, I believe, of the Senate Budget Sub 1 Committee on Education. So another prominent person in the education field in the legislature to keep an eye out for. It's really important in order for us to be advocates. It also starts at the local level, right? So you can advocate to other members of the legislature, but these are the people who you're writing in the chat, your representatives. It's their job to listen to you because you are their constituent, right? So you need to take advantage of that and start having conversations with people in their offices, things like that. And I will show you in this presentation sort of how to go forward in doing that. So I mentioned Assembly Higher Education and the Senate Education Committees. So if you have a representative on one of these committees, either put your hand up or drop it in the chat which committee that you have a representative on. If you have a representative who sits on one of these committees, you are in a very special position as someone who works within the California Community College state issue area, because these people in particular are voting on almost all of the policies that have to do with the California Community Colleges, right? So if you develop a relationship with this member and they know, oh, I know Efren, he is from my district, and I've had conversations with him, and I know that he works in the California Community Colleges and has a good understanding of how these things work. I should take his feedback seriously when it comes to community college policies. Things like that are important, right? So our politicians are not experts on everything, right? They're voting on everything from energy to water use rights to community colleges. Literally anything that you can imagine, there is a policy issue area that they need to vote on and things of that sort. So it's up to us as faculty, students, the people who are on community college campuses and are the experts, right? To provide that feedback to our representatives so they know what their constituents want and they know what's really going on with the California community colleges and are listening to the right voices. You know, if you go back to that link and then look up the address of your college may have a separate set of representatives than you do, especially if you work at multiple different colleges, right? So that means there is way more people who you are sort of constituents of, right? And that also increases your political power when it comes to advocacy in many senses. So it's important to know who your members are, what committees they serve on, so you can form relationships with them and really target your advocacy. So these aren't the only important committees. Like I mentioned, there are all sorts of Senate committees that and assembly budget committees that really impact what's going on at the California community colleges. So go ahead and drop a note in the chat if you have a member who is on any of these committees, because that's also really important, right? Martha, I see that David Alvarez, Assemblymember Alvarez, is your representative, and He was our FACC legislator of the award. This year we awarded him, and he's also the chair of the Assembly Sub 3 Committee on Education Finance, a very powerful district that you are a constituent in. So knowledge is power, right? The more that we know about our representatives and things of that sort, the better advocates we can be, and the better we can utilize where we are geographically positioned within the state of California to advocate for the California community colleges. All right, so connecting with your legislator. I know this can be daunting. I know it can be overwhelming, but we should at least have a conversation about it, right? Democracy only works if we participate in it, right? So every legislator has their own website, so you can look up your member. You can figure out where their district office is. That'll be a lot closer often to where you live than their office in Sacramento. They all have a contact, right? So you can invite them to an event, you can drop your opinion on a particular policy, something that you want them to vote on, something of that sort. But it's important that you get your name out there when it comes to your representative. It's important to start developing a relationship. But even so, you want to be in the know of what they're doing, right? So even when it comes to voting, if you have no idea what your member is doing for your district, you can sign up for their email list, sign up for their press releases. All of that is available on their website, right? So you can make an informed decision. They often have a list of things that they're interested in. Some of them it's education, some of them it's health policy, all of these different things. So it's also, we're all multifaceted individuals with many interests also outside of community colleges, right? And it's important to see ways in which you align with your member, ways in which you don't align with your member. So really getting to know them even from their website before you connect with them is really powerful. But they are beholden to their district, and they will have local events that they're hosting, things of that sort. So I encourage you all to sign up for that email list, find out what's going on in your district and get plugged in, attend local events, and really make a connection with your representative that way. It's often easier than going into a meeting that can often be overwhelming sometimes, to start at a local level and have those conversations in a more organic environment, right, where your members come to reach back out to the community that they're representing. So that is something that's really important. I encourage you to all go ahead and look up now the website of your assembly member and senator. Slide. All right, so advocacy is all about relationships, right? I know that sometimes it's hard to believe this, but politicians are people too, right? And you know, even though they have a lot of power, even though they have a lot of influence, it's another person who you can build a relationship with, right? So they have a team of staff to help them learn about all these different issue areas. Their staff often know a lot more about the issues than they actually do, right? So look up their district office, call their district office, find out, who's on the team, and maybe head over to the office and start having conversations, right? Meeting on a regular basis. It's important to have your member be familiar with you just as you're familiar with them. Whether that's setting up one-on-one meetings, going to district events, town hall meetings, special events. One thing that FACC does is we help our community college faculty set up events and meetings with their local representatives to sort of start having these conversations about community college policy and things of that sort. So that is something that we can help out with. If you're interested, you can invite your member to a faculty meeting, anything that's going on in your campus, right? If they're representing that area, it's their job to come out and engage with you all. So things of that sort. You can volunteer in their office or on their campaigns. If you're interested, you can donate money. You can ask them how you can assist them as someone who's living in the district. So it's important to start building this relationship just as you would with anyone else. Faculty and students are the experts on community college issues. Like I said, they need to be hearing from you guys about what's going on, because you guys know what's going on the ground. You know how these policies are going to play out in real life, and they need to be hearing that feedback from you guys. Because unfortunately, if legislators don't hear from us, they're going to defer to someone else's expertise. And we're going to talk about that and what that can look like in a second. So I know often we think that, okay, community colleges aren't that political. It's not that important. They must have more interesting things to pass legislation about. Unfortunately, that is not the case, right? And some of these are not super controversial pieces of legislation, but all of these things are things that create changes. So as you can see from this chart, we have probably 200-ish bills that have to do with California community colleges that are introduced, and around 100 of them, 75 to 100 of them are signed into law every single year. That's 75 often significant changes to the community college landscape, right? So we need to be engaged in this process. It's going to be happening regardless of whether or not we are plugged in, right? So it's in our best interest to provide that feedback to the legislature, to our representatives, because they're going to be voting on all of these bills. They're going to be seeing all of these bills. And if they're not hearing from faculty, if they're not hearing the student perspective, there are going to be other actors who are going to make their voices heard, and that can cause trouble for us. So there are a lot of nonprofit special interest groups. We like to call them philanthro-capitalists at FACCC, and they are all engaged in the advocacy process, even if the rest of us aren't. So here are some examples: the Lumina Foundation, Michelson 20mm, James Irvine Foundation, ECMC Foundation. And I kind of put just a blurb about what they write on their website, the things that they're passionate about, what their sort of end goals are. But you can see at the bottom, I've written student loans, educational, technology, real estate, and student loans. These are things that they're investing in, right? These are where their vested interests are. So these are 4 different foundations who invest in a lot of the nonprofits that I have listed down below: Education Trust West, Campaign for College Opportunity, California Competes, Public Advocates, California Edge Coalition, California Acceleration Project, Central Valley Higher Education Consortium, right? So even if we as faculty and students are not engaged in this advocacy process, all of these groups are. And you know, sometimes they do have good ideas and do good things, but you know, Lumina does a lot of work with student loans, right? There may be, you know, a special interest there. There's special interest groups. Same with ECMC Foundation. Michelson 20mm, they've done a lot of work on educational technology. Educational technology is something that has drastically shifted our California community college landscape in the last decade or so. The James Irvine Foundation does a lot of work with real estate, and they have been really, really involved with community college housing, right? Do you see like the connection there? And I know that, you know, sometimes you don't assume that there's anything nefarious going on in the community college policy space, but there really is. And we need to be advocates, and we need to advocate for our California community colleges, our students, our faculty, and have the dominant perspective, right? So if the legislature is only hearing from these nonprofit special interest groups, and they're not hearing from any faculty or any students or any of the people who these policies actually impact, that's who they're going to listen to. I know that a lot of us were upset with AB 1705, right? I think an example of this is in the analysis for that bill when it went through Assembly Higher Education, which you can check on the LegInfo website that Wendy dropped a link for in the chat. There were almost like, I think, 100 of these special interest groups and other groups as well, community colleges, things of that sort, who submitted letters of support for AB 1705. In fact, was one of 3 organizations that submitted an opposition, right? And we know that this bill has had devastating consequences on our campuses, but from the legislators' point of view, they're seeing this list of 100-something organizations that think this is a good idea, and only 3 that didn't think it was a good idea. So it's not surprising that they voted yes on it, right? So they're going to listen to whoever's voice is the loudest. And so long as we let special interest groups have the louder voice than our faculty and students, they're going to be the ones who are guiding our policy. So this is sort of like a historical breakdown in the last decade or so of various policy reforms. A lot of them have to do with the transfer agenda that have been pushed often by these special interest groups, right? And this has significantly shaped the trajectory of our California community colleges, unfortunately, in ways that I don't think move us in the direction of equity, that give our students less options, that narrow our mission, and that put a disproportionate focus on transfer above any of the other variety of things that the community colleges offered for our students, right? And regardless of how you feel about these policies, it's important that any community college policy is guided by community colleges and guided by community college faculty and students. So as long as we stay out of this conversation, stay out of this dialogue that is happening, regardless of whether or not we decide to participate, like, we're losing out on an opportunity to shape the face of what's happening in our classrooms, right? Because a lot of the things that are happening in our classrooms are really impacted by what's going on in the legislature. And I know as faculty often we're zoned in on what's happening in our classrooms, on our campuses, but a lot of the issues that we're seeing on community college campuses are stemming from pieces of legislation that are coming down from the state government. So this is an area where we certainly need to be participating. All right, so this is sort of the cycle of how things go with these nonprofit special interest groups. So you'll have a corporation, an example is Walmart, and they will create a nonprofit special interest group. Walmart's special interest group is Ed Trust West. And they'll create a research report on all the things that the California community colleges are doing wrong, and they'll come up with a band-aid solution that doesn't actually, really address the needs and the complexity of these issues. They'll sponsor a piece of legislation. They're Walmart, so they have $1 bajillion that they can spend on lobbyists and donations to political campaigns. So that makes it a lot easier for them to get their bills across the line because they have that sort of power and influence on the legislative process. These bills get passed, it becomes a policy mandate. We're not necessarily getting more money as a system to, make these things happen. Unsurprisingly, the band-aid solution doesn't work, right? So guess what? They can put out another research report on why the community colleges are doing a bad job and come up with another band-aid solution, and this cycle just perpetuates itself. And this is a cycle that we have been stuck in for the last decade or so, and something that we're hoping that we can break, but we can't break it without your guys' participation. So corporations change educational policy, and a lot of this, unfortunately, is in a movement to divert public funds from the community colleges towards privatizing education and making sure that private entities can make the most money as they can off of the community colleges. So it's really, we have something cynical. It's dangerous what we have that's going on. And if we don't participate in this process, we're letting this cycle perpetuate itself. We need to participate in order to intervene to stop this cycle and make sure that community college policy is sort of guided by faculty, students, the community colleges, the people who are impacted by these policies, as opposed to these outside groups that want to influence and have often these ulterior motives, right? So now we're going to get to how you can interrupt this cycle, how you can participate, and how you can make a change and really become a factivist. So I know advocating can be really stressful, especially if it's your first time. It can be really overwhelming to engage with people in power, right? Whether that's on the local level, whether that's with the system-wide partners that we have within the California community colleges, or if that's with the state legislature. And I think these points sort of apply to any of those sorts of meetings that you're getting into. So do's and don'ts of advocating. Be prepared. It's important to know what you're talking about and really have a game plan for the meeting before it happens. It's important to be honest with whoever you're talking to. Be brief. I know often we can go on really long-winded, whether it's a rant or a story, things like that. It's important to stay on topic and be brief. We should be respectful and polite, even if we are upset about something. I know that, like I said, AB 1705 has been disastrous and caused catastrophic consequences on a lot of our campuses. But remember how I said that the legislators are seeing this long list of organizations that support it and a very short list of organizations that are opposed to it, right? We need to be respectful and polite if we want these people to listen to us, right? It's not that they don't have any responsibility, but they're listening to whatever they're told, right? So we need to move forward with a positive point of view and direct solutions, right? Giving them solutions that we think is the best way to move forward with these problems, and be honest, be respectful, be polite, and that will get you way further. I know Wendy likes to compare your first meeting with a legislator, for example, with the first date, right? You're not going to go in the first time you ever meet someone and be yelling at them, oh, I don't like that you did this, oh, like, or you're not going to overwhelm them with all of those things. If it's like a first date, yeah, you're not going to have a second date if you approach it like that. And these are people who are representing you, right? So you need to develop that trust, develop a relationship with them, and that starts usually with positive things first, right? And once you get to that point with your legislator where you have an established relationship, then you can get into these heavier conversations of, hey, this policy has been really bad for us. These are some things that our community college would appreciate you doing moving forward, things of that sort, right? So you need to think of these relationships just as you would with any other relationship in your life, right? We want to treat them with respect, and if we don't, they're not going to listen to us, right? I know this is an anxiety-inducing process sometimes, especially if it's your first time. So certainly take a breath when you're advocating. It's important to, take care of yourself and not get too overwhelmed with what's going on, and be reliable. If you've told the member that you would provide them with some materials, things of that sort, make sure you follow up so they know that you're someone who they can trust going forward, to not go back on your word. So in-person etiquette, if you are going to an in-person meeting, be on time. I know particularly with the legislature, these people's schedules are crazy. Sometimes staff run late. They will try their best. So also be patient, give them some grace. Wear business attire. That's just sort of a respect thing, especially if you're going to Sacramento and in person to the Capitol. Introduce yourself using your affiliation, using your school, and certainly bring extra copies of the materials so you can make sure that you have some sort of something tangible to provide to the people who you're speaking with, so they have something to remember you by and remember what you talked about after your meeting. So, like I said, these are people who we are developing relationships with, and making a connection, like a personal connection, is going to set us up for success in that regard. So an example is, there are a decent amount of college members who have either been on a community college board, or they were a faculty before, or attended a community college, things of that sort. You can say, oh, like, if you do your research, I know that you taught at this college, I teach at this college, and start up a conversation that way. They're going to remember you as somebody who taught at the institution that you teach at now, things like that. Or, I think an example, this is an oddly specific personal one. Chancellor Sonia Christian is the chancellor of the California Community Colleges. She is from the same part of India that I'm from, and I learned that from looking up her Wikipedia. So I told her that the first time that I met her, and now she always remembers me by that, and makes an extra effort, I think, when it comes to our relationship, because I made that connection, right? These people are meeting with so many different people every day, right? So it's important to make a connection and really have yourself sort of stand out, something that they can remember you by, and it's just a good way to, start off on a personal note. So the power of the story. So you can either push out information or you can pull people in with the story. So statistics, things of that sort are important, but often the things that legislators particularly will take with them into other meetings and things of that sort are stories, whether that's student stories, faculty stories of how policies have impacted you all. Those are the things that will stick with them. Those are the things, the anecdotes that they will share with other members of the legislature, things like that. So we need to be thoughtful about the ways in which we're sharing information, not just talking at them and dumping information on them. They do need to have some level of information, but really supplementing that with a story is something that will make you a more effective advocate and give them something notable to remember. So how to approach legislative meetings. So if you are going into a legislative meeting that has been organized by your college, by FACCC, whatever organization, you are a representative of that organization. And it is a privilege that comes with some responsibility, right? So share your stories, share your experiences, make sure that you're staying on track with the message. Again, I understand that it can be very easy to sort of get off track if you're off course, but in order to be most effective advocates, we need to sort of keep that story on message. Focus on the issues that you're most comfortable discussing, the issues that you know the most about, the issues that really hit home for you and are most passionate about. And it's okay if you don't have all the answers. If they have a question and you don't know the answer to it, be honest and say, hey, I don't know. I will get back to you. I will find out. And use that as an opportunity to follow up, send an email. Like I said, be reliable, make sure you provide whatever you told them you would provide. And ask them how you and your college can be helpful to them, right? It is a relationship. It's a two-way street. It's not just something where you go in and say, I want you to do this, 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 and this, and then like there's not anything that you offer them, right? So making sure that that relationship is at least a little bit more balanced than we think it might be with a legislator. Just because they have power and influence doesn't mean there aren't ways that you and your college could help them out. Legislators and their staff are humans. Contrary to popular belief, they are just people, just like you and me. It is part of their job to listen to you. If you are a constituent who elected them, right, it's their job to listen to you. So you don't need to be afraid. That is, really, like I said, a part of their job. It's a part of their duty, right? And just courteously make your points, ask your questions. No need to be timid or awestruck, even though it may be a nerve-inducing experience for the first time. Research the member, know your audience. Like I told you, look up the website, look at the issues that they're more passionate about, right? Again, going back to the first date thing, if you're doing online dating, for example, you'll look at their profile and see whatever they're interested in, so you can like spark conversation on the first date based on those things. Same thing when it comes to a legislator. Look at their website, look at the policies that they've passed, look at what their interest areas are, look at what they've done for your district, stuff of that sort, so you can really have a conversation. Then they'll know that you did your research, they'll know that you did your due diligence, and they will take you more seriously because of that. And then when you're going in a group to advocate, it's important to go in with a game plan. So it's important to have some sort of roles when you're working in a group, and just so you have a good flow of the meeting and it looks like you guys have practiced, you know what you're talking about. So appoint a member to sort of start introductions, give an intro on the main points of why you're there to visit, why you're there to meet with them. Plan which people in your group are going to deliver each talking point, figure out what those talking points are in advance, figure out what stories or anecdotes you would like to share that are relevant to those talking points, and figure out who is going to share those. And then at the end, have someone reiterate the main points and sort of conclude the meeting. So that's an example of roles. And at the end of your visit, have an ask. Okay, so in February, I believe, I went to Washington, D.C. for an annual sort of federal advocacy trip. And I have a friend who's a staffer in D.C. And he and I caught up, and he said, I had all these community college groups come and talk to me, talk to our office. And they told us all about, the issues that they're facing, how, they need more funding, all these different things. And it was nice to hear, but they didn't ask me for anything. They didn't tell me any policies that they want my office to support. And it was good to hear about them and their experience, but I don't really know what to do with that. Can you share with me some things that the California community colleges would like from my office, some specific action items and tasks in which we can engage with our help? We can't just be talking at them, right? Ultimately, there needs to be some action associated with what we're going in for. So whether that's, I want you to vote yes on this particular policy when it goes to the assembly floor, or I would like you to come to our campus and give a talk, or come and engage with us in a forum about a particular policy, things of that sort. It's important to sort of give them something that they can do to follow up on your visit, right? If you don't end your visit with an ask, they're not going to really know what to do with your visit, and it won't make it as powerful going forward. So as for the business card of the staffer who you met with, follow up. right? So continue having these conversations. That first visit shouldn't be the end of your communication with this member. And like I said, especially if you're in person, leave something tangible, leave a talking points document, prepare something in advance that will visually remind your legislator or the staffer of your visit, your position on an issue, along with your ask of what you would like them to do. If you're online, you can email this to them right after. So now we're going to go into an exercise. So this is an example of what working in a group and roles can look like. So first, start off with a round of introductions. The first person can summarize the advocacy priority and make a connection with the legislator or the staffer. The next person can tell a story that is relevant to that advocacy priority. If you're talking about multiple advocacy priorities, for example, if you have multiple bills that you're lobbying in support of, you can go through a bill, then tell a story or an anecdote, a bill, some information, a bill, some stories, things of that sort. And that is sort of what your meeting will go like. Then ask for your members' support of community colleges, whether it's budget or through bills. Ask for their contact information for you to follow up, provide your tangible leave behind document, say thank you, and then follow up after that, right? So I know this is really conceptual right now, and it can be hard to figure out how to put this into practice. So the advocacy priority that I'm giving you to lobby legislators for is reducing tuition for California community colleges. We're going to have you lobby two hypothetical members of the legislature. One is a Republican who's from a rural area, and one of their big focuses is increasing access to local jobs. And the second one is a Democrat from an urban area who is focused on improving outcomes for marginalized communities. So I want you to come up with, you have the advocacy priority, but sort of run yourselves through a conversation of what a legislative visit could look like with the various roles that I outlined that are on the bottom of this slide. Your message is going to look different for the Democrat and the Republican, right? When we know our audience, we need to market messages differently. So I want you to think about and have conversations about like how could I convince a Republican who has these focuses why it would be a good idea to reduce tuition for the California community colleges? What part of reducing tuition for California community colleges would appeal to a Democrat, right? Think about the way that you want to market your message, have a conversation about that, decide sort of what you guys want to say, break up into roles, and then run your sample meeting. But it's important that, you know, we use this as an opportunity to grow. Advocacy is the ability to advocate, I think, is a muscle, and we need to sort of practice in order to like grow that muscle and use it more, and it'll become easier the more practice you have, right? But debriefing after an advocacy meeting is something that is beneficial to everybody in the group, right? And it will benefit the next person who you talk to as well, if you're growing and learning from these experiences. So make sure that you review your notes so everybody knows what was said. If you've promised to send something to a legislator, something of that sort, make sure that you do that, and make sure you make next steps to maintain that contact and maintain the legislator support and gain it. Evaluate the group's performance. Evaluate yourself. What are things that I did well? What are things that I need more practice on? And practice those skills, right? And identify your collective strengths and weaknesses. If someone maybe is more, they tend to be more drawn out in their stories, maybe don't have that person be the storyteller, have that person give the elevator pitch, or have them do the intro or conclusion. If someone is particularly skilled at storytelling, have them give the anecdote, right? So play to everybody's collective strengths and weaknesses in order to have a really strong advocacy team. Coordinate your efforts, so send more information, follow up with the district office, do some stuff locally with the legislator, things of that sort in a timely manner to really get the ball moving with that relationship, right? It's good to continue that communication once we start it up. And afterwards, send an email that expresses your appreciation. Thank you for meeting with us. We were happy to talk to you about this policy of reducing tuition for the California community colleges, and we would appreciate you supporting this bill that would reduce tuition. And here are some supplemental materials that we covered during our meeting. I want you to just have access to this and be sure to feel free to ask me any questions that you have regarding this topic, right? And sending a thank you note will bring your visit back to top of mind for them, and having it in writing, the purpose of your visit and what you talked about, is also something that's beneficial for following up. And it's just a good practice, right, to be respectful and thank them for their time, considering how busy all of them are. So that is what I have for you guys today. My email is on this slide. As Wendy had mentioned, we are happy to do advocacy trainings at other colleges with the union. I'm happy to come to your campuses and grow some more factivists. Any questions that you have regarding this presentation, go ahead, feel free to send them to me via email. Would love to have a conversation, and yeah, go ahead and go out and be good factivists.
Thank you everyone for attending.
Yes, thank you everyone for spending your time with us today.